They say blood is thicker than water, but no one tells you what happens when that blood turns to poison. My sister Victoria has always been the golden child. Perfect grades, perfect husband, perfect job, perfect everything. While I spent 3 years caring for our dying grandmother, Victoria was building her empire in Manhattan. Then Grandma Rose died, and Victoria swooped in like a vulture. She manipulated the will, stole my inheritance, seduced my fiancé during my time of grief. She thought she'd won everything. But she didn't know about Grandma Rose's secret journals. 30 years of family secrets, hidden bank accounts, and enough dirt to bury Victoria's perfect life 6 feet under. Grandma Rose always said, "Patience, Celine. The right cards played at the right time can topple any kingdom." Time to play my hand. My name is Celine Mitchell, and I've been invisible my entire life. Victoria was born first, naturally, 3 years older, 3 inches taller, 3 times more charming. She walked at 10 months, talked in full sentences by 18 months, and by age 5 had already convinced our parents she was destined for greatness. I was the accident, the surprise blessing that arrived when Victoria was old enough to help with diaper changes. While she excelled at piano recitals and debate competitions, I was the quiet one who preferred books to parties, gardens to galas. Our parents, Robert and Grace, never tried to hide their pride in Victoria's achievements. Medical school at Harvard, residency at Johns Hopkins, marriage to Dr. Marcus Thompson, a neurosurgeon with political connections. They'd beam when introducing our daughter the doctor, and then add, almost as an afterthought, "And this is Celine, our other daughter." The only person who ever saw me was Grandma Rose. Rose Mitchell had been the family matriarch for as long anyone could remember. She'd built a small empire from nothing, starting with a tiny corner store in Queens and eventually owning 3 successful retail chains across New York. She was sharp as a tack well into her 70s, managing her businesses with an iron fist wrapped in a velvet glove. When she started showing signs of dementia at 78, I was the one who stepped up. Victoria was too busy saving lives to handle elder care. Our parents were too emotionally involved to make difficult decisions. So I became Grandma Rose's primary caregiver, moving into her house in Westchester and watching the strongest woman I'd ever known fade away. For 3 years, I lived in Grandma Rose's house, watching her mind slip away piece by piece. The doctors called it early onset Alzheimer's with aggressive progression. I called it heartbreaking. Some days she'd remember every detail of her childhood in Brooklyn. Other days she'd forget my name and asked when her mother was coming to visit. I learned to navigate her world: morning coffee at exactly 7 a.m., afternoon walks in the garden where she'd point out flowers and tell me their names, evening stories about her late husband Joseph, who died when I was 12. Victoria visited once a month, usually on Sundays after church. She'd arrive in her BMW, dressed in designer clothes, bringing expensive flowers and guilt-inducing lectures about proper medical care. She'd say, "Celine, you're not qualified for this. She needs professional help. Memory care facilities have trained staff." But Grandma Rose would clutch my hand whenever Victoria suggested moving her. "I want to stay home," she'd whisper. "Celine understands me." So I stayed. I put my life on hold. My teaching job, my social life, my relationship with David, my fiancé. David was patient at first, understanding that family came first. But as months turned to years, I felt him pulling away. During her bad days, I'd organize her papers, trying to create some semblance of order from decades of accumulated life. That's when I first noticed the locked drawer in her bedroom desk. "What's in there, Grandma?" I asked one afternoon. She looked at me with surprising clarity. She said, "Insurance for the family." I didn't understand what she meant then. Grandma Rose's final months were brutal. The woman who once negotiated million-dollar business deals couldn't remember how to use a fork. She'd wake up screaming for her mother, convinced she was still a child in Depression-era Brooklyn. Some nights, I'd find her wandering the house in her nightgown, searching for people who'd been dead for decades. Victoria's visits became more frequent as the end approached, but her focus was always clinical. She'd arrive with medical charts and prognosis updates, discussing Grandma Rose's condition like she was presenting a case study. She'd tell our parents, "The deterioration is accelerating. We should start discussing end-of-life arrangements." But I was living the deterioration. I was the one who held Grandma Rose during her panic attacks, who sang her childhood lullabies when she couldn't sleep, who pretended to be her sister when she forgot I was her granddaughter. David's patience finally snapped during one of our rare phone conversations. He said, "Celine, I can't do this anymore. We've been engaged for 2 years, and I've seen you maybe 20 times. I feel like I'm dating a ghost." I wanted to fight for us, but I was exhausted. I said, "I know. I'm sorry." So David started coming over on weekends, helping with meals and household tasks. He was gentle with Grandma Rose, patient with her confusion, and supportive of my dedication. It was during one of these visits that Victoria arrived unexpectedly. She walked into the living room wearing a stunning sundress, her hair perfectly styled. David looked up from the puzzle he was working on with Grandma Rose and smiled. He said, "You must be Victoria," standing to shake her hand. Victoria's smile was radiant. "And you must be the famous David."
The locked drawer in Grandma Rose's bedroom desk had haunted me for months. I'd inherited her personal effects, which Victoria had interpreted as jewelry, photo albums, and sentimental items. But I'd also inherited her furniture, including the mahogany desk where she'd managed her business empire for decades. The key came to me by accident. I was organizing her jewelry box when I found a small brass key tucked behind the velvet lining. My hands shook as I inserted it into the desk drawer. Inside, I found 23 leather-bound journals. Each one was labeled with years: 1995 to 1997, 1998 to 2000, 2001 to 2003. The most recent one was labeled 2018-2021, the final accounting. I opened the first journal and found Grandma Rose's careful handwriting documenting everything: family conversations, business dealings, personal observations, and most importantly, secrets. She'd been keeping detailed records of our family for nearly 30 years. The early journals were mostly business-focused, but as the years progressed, they became more personal. She documented our parents' marriage problems, Victoria's academic struggles, and even my own teenage insecurities. But it was the final journal that made my blood run cold. Victoria arrived today with papers and a lawyer. Read one entry from February 2021. "She thinks I don't understand what's happening, but my mind is clearer than she knows. She's trying to change my will, but she doesn't know I've been planning this for years." There were pages detailing Victoria's secret financial problems: gambling debts, credit card fraud, tax evasion. Her perfect marriage was a sham. Marcus was having an affair with a nurse, and Victoria was blackmailing him to maintain their public image. But the most damning entry was dated just 2 weeks before Grandma Rose died. Today, I signed the papers Victoria brought. She doesn't know about the Swiss account I've been filling for Celine since she was born. The documents hidden in the final journal were more valuable than money. Swiss bank account information, property deeds, investment portfolios, a safety deposit box key, and most importantly, a letter addressed to me in Grandma Rose's handwriting. "My dearest Celine, if you're reading this, then Victoria has shown her true nature and you've discovered what I've known for years. Your sister is a brilliant woman, but she's also ruthless and selfish." The letter continued for 3 pages, explaining how Grandma Rose had been secretly moving assets out of the country for years, building a parallel inheritance that Victoria knew nothing about. The house and businesses Victoria inherited are heavily mortgaged and deeply in debt. I've been borrowing against them to fund your real inheritance. She'll realize within 6 months that she's inherited my problems, not my wealth. I called the number Grandma Rose had provided for her Swiss banker. After verifying my identity, I learned the truth. I was worth 12 million Swiss francs, nearly $13 million. Properties in London, Dubai, and Toronto, stock portfolios in tech companies, precious metals and rare art, a trust fund that would generate millions in annual income. Grandma Rose had been planning this for decades, quietly moving money offshore every time Victoria disappointed her with selfishness or cruelty. She chose ambition over family, but you chose love over everything else. You sacrificed your career, your relationship, your future to care for me. That's why you deserve the real inheritance. But the money wasn't the most valuable thing in those journals. The most valuable thing was the truth about Victoria, and I was about to use it. Armed with Grandma Rose's evidence, I began my own investigation into Victoria's life. She'd been living beyond her means for years, funding her luxury lifestyle with credit cards and loans. Her medical practice was drowning in malpractice insurance costs after 3 patient complaints. Her husband Marcus was indeed having an affair, but he was also embezzling money from the hospital. Most damning of all, Victoria had been forging prescriptions and selling them to a drug dealer in Queens. She'd been using her medical license to traffic pharmaceutical opioids, generating cash to cover her gambling debts. I hired a private investigator named James Wilson, a former NYPD detective who specialized in financial crimes. Within 2 weeks, he'd confirmed everything Grandma Rose had documented and found additional evidence. "Your sister is running a sophisticated fraud operation," he told me during our meeting at a quiet cafe in Brooklyn. "She's been using her medical credentials to steal from patients, insurance companies, and pharmaceutical suppliers." "Can you prove it?" "I can prove it in court, but that's not the only way to handle this." He was right. Criminal prosecution would be satisfying, but it would also be public and messy. Victoria would hire expensive lawyers, drag the family through a scandal, and potentially avoid serious consequences due to her connections. I wanted something more personal. I wanted Victoria to experience the same betrayal and humiliation she'd inflicted on me. "What do you suggest?" I asked. James smiled. "Strategic disclosure. We expose her secrets to the people who matter most: her husband, her employer, her social circle. Let her perfect world collapse from within." "And David?" "Men like David don't handle deception well, especially when they discover they've been manipulated." I thought about David's earnest face, his genuine concern for my well-being, his guilt about falling in love with Victoria during my grief process. I decided that David deserved the truth. James handed me a flash drive. "Everything you need is here." I held the drive like a weapon, because that's exactly what it was. I spent weeks planning Victoria's destruction with the same methodical care she'd used to dismantle my life. First, I needed to get close to her again. I couldn't expose her secrets from a distance. I needed to be positioned as the grieving sister who'd finally accepted her loss and wanted to rebuild our relationship. I started small. A text message congratulating her on a medical conference presentation. A phone call asking for advice about career changes. A lunch invitation to clear the air about our family situation. Victoria was delighted by my apparent recovery. "I'm so proud of you for seeking therapy," she said over coffee at a trendy cafe in Manhattan. "You seem much more centered now." "I've been thinking about what you said, about Grandma Rose wanting the businesses to stay in capable hands. You were right. I wouldn't have known how to manage her empire." Victoria's smile was radiant. "I'm so glad you understand. I've been working so hard to honor her legacy." "And how are things going with the transition?" For the first time, Victoria's confidence faltered. "There have been some unexpected challenges. The businesses were more complex than I realized, lots of debt and legal complications." "I'm sorry to hear that. Anything I can help with?" Actually, yes. I've been thinking about selling the house. The maintenance costs are astronomical, and I don't really need that much space. I nearly laughed out loud. Victoria was discovering that inheriting Grandma Rose's empire meant inheriting her debts and problems too. That's probably wise, I said sympathetically. I'm also thinking about bringing in business partners for the retail stores. Fresh perspectives, new capital. Translation: Victoria was drowning in debt and desperately needed investors to save her from bankruptcy. And how are things with David? Victoria's face lit up. Wonderful. He's been so supportive during this difficult transition. We're actually talking about getting engaged. That's amazing. I'm so happy for you both. You mean that? I do. You deserve happiness. Victoria reached across the table to squeeze my hand. You're being so gracious about this. But I was thinking about James's flash drive, sitting in my purse like a loaded gun.
I chose Marcus's birthday party as the perfect stage for Victoria's downfall. It was a lavish affair at the Plaza Hotel, attended by doctors, lawyers, politicians, and socialites. Victoria had planned it as a celebration of their perfect marriage and her success in managing Grandma Rose's business empire. I arrived fashionably late, wearing a stunning red dress purchased with my Swiss inheritance money. Victoria was delighted to see me, introducing me to her important friends as my amazing sister, who's finally found her way after our grandmother's death. David was there too, looking handsome but uncomfortable in his designer suit. He greeted me with polite warmth, asking about my job search and apartment. I could see Victoria watching our interaction, ready to intervene if necessary. Victoria has been through such a difficult time, she told their friends, but she's finally accepting that everything happens for a reason. Indeed it does, I agreed, raising my champagne glass. I'd like to make a toast to Victoria and Marcus, to perfect marriages and perfect lives built on perfect foundations. The crowd gathered around as I climbed onto a chair, commanding attention with the confidence of someone who'd finally found her power. My sister, Victoria, has always been the golden child. Perfect grades, perfect career, perfect everything. When our grandmother died, Victoria inherited her business empire because she was the capable one. Victoria beamed, basking in the public praise. But what makes Victoria truly special is her ability to see opportunities others miss. For example, she saw an opportunity to help me through my grief by befriending my fiancé, David. She saw an opportunity to modernize Grandma Rose's businesses by borrowing against them. She even saw an opportunity to supplement her medical income by selling prescription drugs to dealers in Queens. The room went silent. Victoria's face drained of color. Celine, what are you... She saw opportunities to commit insurance fraud, forge medical documents, and evade taxes. She saw an opportunity to blackmail her husband about his affair with nurse Jennifer Martinez to maintain their perfect public image. Marcus stepped forward. What the hell are you talking about? I pulled out a folder of photographs. These are pictures of Victoria meeting with known drug dealers. These are copies of forged prescriptions. These are bank records showing unreported income from pharmaceutical sales. 6 months later, I was living in London, managing my international property portfolio from a beautiful flat in Kensington. Victoria's life had unraveled exactly as Grandma Wynne had predicted. The businesses she'd inherited were liquidated to pay creditors. The house was sold to cover legal fees. Her medical license was suspended pending investigation into the prescription fraud charges. David had tried to contact me several times, but I'd blocked his number. Some betrayals were too fundamental to forgive, even when they came from a place of manipulation. My parents had been horrified by the revelations about Victoria's criminal activities, but they'd also been forced to confront their own role in our family's dysfunction. "We failed you," my mother had said during one of our video calls. "We were so proud of Victoria's achievements that we forgot to see your worth." "I know," I'd replied, "but I see it now." The truth was, I'd never been happier. My Swiss inheritance had given me financial freedom, but more importantly, Grandma Rose's journals had given me emotional freedom. I finally understood that Victoria's cruelty wasn't about my inadequacy, it was about her own insecurity and greed. I'd started a foundation in Grandma Rose's name, providing scholarships for young women from disadvantaged backgrounds. I'd also begun writing a book about elder care and family dynamics, hoping to help other caregivers avoid the manipulation I had experienced. But the most satisfying part of my new life was a letter I'd received from Victoria 2 weeks ago. Celine, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I was jealous of the relationship you had with Grandma Rose, and I convinced myself that I deserved her inheritance more than you did. The letter continued for several pages, detailing Victoria's financial struggles, her isolation from our family, and her regret about destroying our relationship. I'd read the letter twice, then filed it away without responding. Some people deserved second chances. Victoria wasn't one of them. I was in my Toronto office, reviewing foundation applications, when my assistant knocked on the door. "Miss Mitchell, there's someone here to see you. Says she's your sister." I looked up to see Victoria standing in my doorway, wearing a simple dress and carrying a worn handbag. She looked tired, older, humbled by the consequences of her choices. "Hello, Celine," she said quietly. "Hello, Victoria." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "What brings you to Toronto?" "I wanted to see you, to apologize properly, face to face." I studied her for a long moment. "You've come a long way for an apology." "I've had a lot of time to think about what I did, about who I became." She paused, gathering courage. "I stole your life, Celine. Your inheritance, your fiancé, your family's respect. I stole everything because I was scared of being ordinary. And now? Now I am ordinary. Less than ordinary, actually. I'm a cautionary tale about what happens when you choose ambition over humanity." "What do you want from me, Victoria?" "Nothing," she said simply. "I just wanted you to know that Grandma Rose was right about both of us. You do have the heart, and you deserved everything she left you." We sat in silence for several minutes. Two sisters who'd once shared everything, now separated by an ocean of betrayal and consequence. "I should go," Victoria said finally. I needed you to know that I understand now. What I destroyed wasn't just your life, it was mine too." As she stood to leave, I felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. "Victoria," I called as she reached the door. "For what it's worth, I hope you find your way to a better life." She turned back with tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Celine. That means more than you know." After she left, I sat in my office thinking about forgiveness, justice, and the price of revenge. I'd gotten everything I'd wanted: Victoria's downfall, public vindication, financial security, and emotional freedom. I pulled out a piece of paper and began writing a letter to Grandma Rose. "Dear Grandma Rose, today I learned the final lesson you wanted to teach me. Revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about becoming so strong that their opinions no longer matter." Outside my window, Toronto's skyline stretched toward the horizon, full of possibilities and new beginnings. The invisible granddaughter had finally learned to see herself clearly. And what she saw was magnificent.
3 weeks before Grandma Rose died, Victoria announced she was taking a sabbatical from the hospital. "I want to spend more time with family," she told our parents over Sunday dinner. "Life is too short to miss these precious moments." I was suspicious, but grateful. Caring for Grandma Rose had become a 24-hour job, and I was running on fumes and stubbornness. Victoria moved into the guest room, bringing her designer luggage and medical expertise. She reorganized Grandma Rose's medications, scheduled consultations with specialists, and transformed the sick room into something resembling a private hospital ward. "Celine, you've done an incredible job," she said, reviewing the care logs I'd been keeping. "But let me handle the medical side. You focus on the emotional support." But I started noticing changes in Grandma Rose's behavior. She became more agitated during Victoria's medical examinations. She'd grip my hand when Victoria entered the room, whispering things like, "Don't trust her," and "She wants something." Then Victoria started bringing lawyers to the house. "We need to update Grandma Rose's will," she explained. "Some of the beneficiaries are outdated, and the tax implications could be problematic for the family." The lawyer was a thin, nervous man named Mr. Peterson,
who seemed uncomfortable with the entire situation. He'd sit with Grandma Rose for hours, asking repeated questions about her wishes and understanding of the documents. Victoria was always present during these sessions, positioned where Grandma Rose could see her, but the lawyer couldn't. She'd nod encouragingly when Grandma Rose hesitated, and mouth words like yes and good to guide her responses. Meanwhile, David had started coming by every day, sometimes staying for dinner. He and Victoria would chat about medical research, hospital politics, and shared acquaintances. They had so much in common. I'd watch them laugh together and feel like I was disappearing. Grandma Rose died on a Tuesday morning in March, peacefully in her sleep. I found her when I brought her morning coffee, her face serene and finally free from the confusion that had plagued her final months. Victoria was at the hospital, David was at work, and I was alone with the woman who'd been my anchor for 28 years. I sat with her for an hour before calling anyone, holding her hand and telling her all the things I'd been too afraid to say while she was alive. How grateful I was for her love, how much I'd learned from her strength, how I'd try to make her proud. Victoria arrived within minutes of my call, immediately taking charge of the medical and legal procedures. She was efficient, professional, and surprisingly comforting. The funeral was beautiful. Hundreds of people came to pay their respects. Business associates, family friends, former employees, community leaders. Victoria delivered a moving eulogy about Grandma Rose's legacy of strength and determination. I spoke briefly about her kindness and wisdom, but my voice cracked halfway through. Victoria stepped forward to finish my remarks, her arm around my shoulders in a gesture of sisterly support. David was wonderful throughout the entire process. He handled logistics, coordinated with the caterers, and stayed close to me during the difficult moments. 3 days after the funeral, Victoria called a family meeting. "We need to discuss Grandma Rouse's will," she announced, gathering our parents and me in the living room. Mr. Peterson opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick legal document. I listened in growing horror as he read the details. The house, worth over $2 million, went to Victoria. The 3 retail stores, generating millions in annual revenue, went to Victoria. The investment accounts, totaling nearly $1.5 million, went to Victoria. I inherited Grandma Rose's personal effects and $75,000. The grief hit me like a physical blow. Not just the loss of Grandma Rose, but the loss of my identity, my home, my purpose. For 3 years, I'd been someone's most important person. Now I was unemployed, homeless, and apparently worth less than a used car in my family's estimation. Victoria was gracious about the transition. She said, "Take your time moving out. There's no rush. I know this house holds special memories for you." But I couldn't stay. I moved into a small apartment in Queens, funded by my modest inheritance. David helped me pack, his presence a comfort during the most difficult transition of my life. "It's not about the money," I told David. "It's about feeling forgotten. Like the last 3 years didn't matter." "They mattered," he said firmly. "You gave her the greatest gift possible, your time and love." That's when Victoria started calling David. It began innocently enough. "I'm worried about Celine," she'd tell David. "She seems so lost. Maybe you could convince her to see a grief counselor." David, being the caring man I'd fallen in love with, took Victoria's concerns seriously. Victoria began inviting herself to our dinner dates, positioned as family support during my difficult period. "Celine needs to get out more," she'd tell David. "She's isolating herself." They started meeting for coffee to strategize about my well-being, then lunch meetings to discuss my recovery process. Victoria was just being a concerned sister, using her medical expertise to help my healing journey. The first time I saw them together, really together, was at a restaurant in Manhattan. I'd gone to meet David for dinner and found them at a corner table, her hand covering his, both of them leaning forward in intimate conversation. When David saw me, he jumped up with a guilty expression. "Celine, you're early. Victoria was just helping me understand grief counseling options."
I stood there, feeling like an intruder in my own relationship, watching my sister and my fiancé explain why they'd been holding hands. The breakup happened slowly, then all at once. David started canceling our dates, claiming work emergencies and family obligations. Our conversations became stilted, filled with awkward pauses and careful words. He'd ask about my job search and therapy progress with the detached concern of a social worker, not a lover. Victoria, meanwhile, was everywhere. She'd show up at my apartment with groceries and concern. She'd call my parents with updates on my emotional state. She'd text David with suggestions for helping Celine through this difficult transition. "I think we should take a break," David said during what would be our final dinner together. "You're going through so much right now, and I don't want to add pressure to your healing process." Victoria suggested this, didn't she? He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "She's worried about you. We both are." I slid my engagement ring across the table. "Here's your space." 2 weeks later, I saw them together at the Mount Sinai Hospital Charity Gala. Victoria was radiant in a black evening gown, David handsome in his tuxedo. They moved through the crowd like they'd been together for years. I was there with a friend from my old teaching job, wearing a dress I'd bought 3 years ago. I felt invisible, insignificant, completely erased from my own life. "Celine," Victoria spotted me across the room and approached with a brilliant smile. "You look wonderful. I'm so glad you're getting out." "Actually," Victoria's voice dropped to a conspiratory whisper, "I wanted to tell you first, David and I, well, we've grown quite close during this difficult time. I hope you'll be happy for us." That night, I sat in my empty apartment and finally understood what had happened. Victoria had systematically dismantled my life while appearing to help me heal. But there was one thing she didn't know. Grandma Rose had left me more than personal effects and a modest bank account. She'd left me the truth.